Good afternoon and welcome to Karma Summit India. My name is Loni Anthony and I'm the Vice Chairman at Hitachi Payment Services. I've been an actively involved in the whole payment space for the almost 2.5 decades now, and also the co-chairman at the Payment Council of India, kind of looking after the advocacy matters related to the payment industry with the government and regulators. Also been an entrepreneur. I had my co-founder of a company called Prism Payment Services, which got acquired by Hitachi Payments, and I continue to be associated with them. I've also recently been involved with the whole Action COVID team called ACT, and now part of the new phase of ACT, which is going to look after new pillars other than health, and also going to look at education and environment. I'm part of the core team also developing the whole new strategy for ACT2. Want to thank all of you to have taken time out to join us today on this important discussion around startups for good, reimagining your businesses both for COVID and post-COVID. As all of us know, the COVID has changed our world in many ways, and we are adapting and learning to live with a new reality. The outbreak of this pandemic has gone in such a global scale and has had huge impact with startups across diverse sectors in India. But some innovative young firms have acted quickly and with agility to the pandemic and have been critical in transforming across to digital education, health services, and providing innovation in medical goods and services. In order to deep dive into the conversation around how startups have pivoted their business because of COVID and the support they received, we have brought together an esteemed panel to discuss their experience and opportunities they envision for the future. We're joined today by Mr. Ashok Pamidi from NASSCOM Foundation. Ashok, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashok Pamidi. I look after the NASSCOM Foundation. I've been with part of NASSCOM and NASSCOM Foundation for the last 7 years. I've been a part of the industry for over 30 years, having worked in companies like Digital, Compaq, HP, the longest duration, about 16 years. Started off my career in a public sector undertaking in the digital system called Uptron way back in '85, having worked in various segments or portfolios encompassing contract manufacturing to sales and marketing to business development, as well as project management. At NASSCOM Foundation, apart from the skilling and the Tech for Good initiative, I also lead the diversity and inclusion for NASSCOM, which I've been doing for the last 7 years. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing more from others.
I also welcome Ms. Aastha Grover. Grover, would you quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm Aastha. I head the Startup India team at Invest India. Invest India is the National Investment Promotion Agency of India. And as all of you may already be aware, Startup India is the flagship initiative of the Government of India intended to build a strong ecosystem to promote innovation and entrepreneurship in the nation. So when the action plan was launched back in 2016, since my team has been working to promote this ecosystem, to promote entrepreneurship in the nation. And with that, the mandate of the team is to enable an ease of doing business for startups, provide them market access, as well as access to capital. Looking forward to a healthy discussion with all of you.
Next, we are joined by Dr. Ajay Nair. Dr. Nair, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Loni. Hi, my name is Dr. Ajay Nair. I head Swasth Digital Health Foundation. Swasth is a foundation that came together during COVID with the goal of making digital health infrastructure for public good. I am a public health physician by training, trained in Mumbai at Grants Medical College in the government of Maharashtra, and then studied public health in the US at Harvard University. I have played a few different roles in healthcare. I started off as a healthcare social impact investor with a fund called Acumen Fund in New York and then in Nairobi. I then started a social enterprise in Mumbai called Mera Doctor, which really did rural telemedicine, connecting patients across rural India to doctors in India. Very excited to be here and look forward to this panel.
Okay, our final panelist is Siraj Dhanani. Siraj, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Loni, and thanks for the team for having me here. My name is Siraj, and I represent a company called InnAccel. I'm the founder and CEO of InnAccel Medical Technologies. We are a medical technology startup that's creating innovative medical technologies specifically for unmet healthcare needs that we find in India and in emerging markets. InnAccel today has products in the maternal care and the critical care space. And we also are very excited to contribute to the whole COVID scenario through a non-invasive ventilation system that we built during the lockdown that I'll talk about later. This is my second entrepreneurial venture. Prior to this, I had started and was leading a company called Pharma. This was in the business analytics space. We were one of the early KPOs to have started in India late 2003. And this was a venture that me and my team and my partner built up, and we eventually exited through a sale to a global leader called IMS Health. In 2012, I was looking at different areas to work on for my second venture, and the lack of real innovation in medical technology and actually in the entire physical technology domain in India was something that I saw was a real need and an opportunity. And that really has been the genesis of InnAccel, which is to try to create novel technologies with global patents that address unmet needs we find in it. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
So that's great, the round of introductions. Thank you for having introduced yourself. And I think we can get straight on to the panel discussions now. And I would start with Ashok. Ashok, COVID has changed our lives in many ways. The startup and the entire social development ecosystem equilibrium has got impacted. What were some of the initiatives taken by NASSCOM Foundation to help the ecosystem cope up with this situation?
Yeah, Loni, I would say that yes, the pandemic basically brought the entire country to a standstill for quite some time. And obviously, the social sector was impacted slightly more because they were always on the field all the time. Some of the steps we immediately realized is that this is a great opportunity for disruption, because we always talk about enterprise disruption, and actually the current pandemic has actually brought about a lot of disruption at the enterprise. We also felt that many of the the NGO sectors as well as startups in the social side of it could get into disruption. So we went about in a very methodical manner in trying to educate a large set of partners on digital disruption, because we are the largest software donor in Asia Pacific. So we had all the tie-ups with a lot of vendors across the globe. And based on that, we went about, actually educating the NGOs as well as the startups in the social sector on disruption. So that's one angle. Second angle is purely coming in from our sister concern, because we are having our, the NASSCOM 10,000, that is 10K, as well as the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence was very magnanimous. We have 4 centers, one in Bangalore, one in Vizag, one in Gurgaon, and other one is in Ahmedabad or Gandhinagar. All the 4 centers decided that they will not charge any fees for the startups. Basically, we sort of, we encourage them to, because, considering that initial period, at least when the lockdown was announced across the country, they definitely faced a lot of problem. In fact, the data said almost 70% of them they didn't have much of a runway, just about 3 months and odd. So we thought that's the right approach for us to actually encourage them. And so we didn't charge any fees for these startups from the NASSCOM Center of Excellence perspective. So that's the other angle we went about. And of course, a lot of other things which, we were able to help the social sector, especially because one of the areas is when we're talking about disruption, can we also help them in giving the necessary tools, right? And software. So that the other angle is, in fact, Zoom software through us actually boomed nearly about 300%, because we were actually the only one for selling to the NGO sector. So there were various other associated tools, especially in terms of communication or actually commuting, or what you can call it, actually handling your own donors or handling your clients. So those were some of the steps which we took so that we are able to actually make the entire transition from what you can call it offline to a completely sort of an online type of activity, so that it helps the transition for the NGOs as well as the social sector.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't realize that, you really impacted the Zoom business. Like they say, Zoom barabar Zoom now. So good to hear that. Aastha, next question to you. Government has played a very important role in supporting startups to survive the impact of COVID. What were some of those initiatives that were undertaken and how did they impact the startups?
Sure. Thank you, Luni. Like you rightly mentioned, right, those were tough times. March, the lockdown had just begun, and we were trying to still figure out how to help startups. And organizations like NASSCOM and IN had done a survey for startups where they found that the runway of the startups was pretty less, and 40% of them were under the threat of not even surviving. So, accounting for all that, our measures were divided into three folds. The first thing we did was, at the time of the lockdown, we wanted to ensure that all the necessities, all the essentials logistically are taken care of. So Invest India built a business immunity platform where all guidelines, all lockdown restrictions, all information with every state policy was put up, and there was a state nodal identified with all these organizations, so that if there is any movement of good that is stuck, through the DPIT control room that was set up and being monitored by Invest India, we could take care of this. To give you an example, Air India approached us saying that, for a rescue operation they were conducting in Europe, they wanted hazmat air suits. One was, how do you make these suits reach to Air India? Second, how do you find who is supplying this at the right time? So we had also connected, we'd also done a huge supply and demand exercise through the business immunity platform, where any supplier of PPE kits, these ventilator suits, these parts was, at one place, and any demand that we received from the states, from organizations, was matched basis location and basis the requirement. So within 24 hours of receiving this request from Air India, we found a DPIT recognized startup only, Moglix Lab, and they were able to provide these suits, which were again logistically delivered to them very quickly through the setup of the control room. So one, I think just bringing this entire community together by building this digital platform has helped us analyze more than 50,000 PPE kits that startups had pivoted to develop that time and match them with different states and hospitals that was needed at that time. Second, we realized that these were tough times and every country were coming up with an economic package. But what really helped us was also pushing deadlines. So the government did announce a host of incentives and deadlines, and increasing the economic package, which majorly was for MSME, but by changing the definition of MSME so that startups were also becoming a part of MSME, all those incentives were also applicable to startups. The third thing we did was we launched, along with an interministerial committee with the Department of Science and Technology, NITI and Biotechnology, we hosted a COVID challenge. The idea was that let's find the solutions that are available in the market, and these solutions were across parameters, critical care equipments, and then there were non-critical care items, as well as, like tracking isolation devices, so the tracking devices that could be picked up or set up in isolation wards. So we received about 776 applications from startups across this challenge. And this interministerial committee, which was also supported by NASSCOM later, identified top 70 solutions, which were then hand-holded and supported and connected with various hospitals, state governments. I remember InnAccel had also applied to that pool, and we had shared with the ACT grant as well. A lot of corporates like Reliance, Aditya Birla came forward saying, when our factories will open, we are looking at mass sanitization solutions, we are looking at tracking solutions. So we gave them this ready pitch deck of solutions which were already gone through a due diligence process by the interministerial committee, so that they could be finally deployed with the end users who were coming to us with meeting this demand. So I guess in a nutshell, yes, bringing everyone together, setting a centralized helpline, pushing GST, TDS filings, income tax return, offering moratorium periods, working with SIDBI to come up with the special loan scheme, and bridging the supply and demand were the key activities which we were working on during that time.
Well, that's great to know, Aastha, especially when the government took a lot of flack saying that among all the countries, India did not come with too many incentives that you could work on, specifically targeting the startups and how they benefited out of your initiatives. So I'll move to Dr. Ajay. Ajay, during COVID, many new startups were seen growing, transforming the crisis into an opportunity. What was the trigger for you, or where did the idea of Swasth come from?
Thank you, Loni. So, Swasth is a unique organization in the sense that it is a product of this pandemic. So, Swasth did not exist before the pandemic. It came together as a bunch of volunteers who came together when the pandemic was starting. And this is mostly from the healthcare technology ecosystem and some of the larger hospitals. And these volunteers came together and they started building solutions for COVID. And what Swasth built out in a very short span was a 360-degree COVID solution that included everything from telemedicine, teletriage, that's available on our website right now, to integration with labs and pharmacies that cover more than 95% of the PIN codes in India, as well as contact information for hospitals across the country. And this was sort of the initial set, and then they built out. Again, this is over 200 volunteers working night and day. Also built out a mental health solution, which is one of the first in the country, where you have multiple different services and assessments available. We also built out a technology platform that allows public health authorities to work with multiple different service providers for home isolation management, and which is being used in Karnataka right now, where the tech platform is used by the public health authorities, and then there are multiple service providers who can actually plug into that, which has allowed them to handle over 100,000 patients. So this was the immediate response, and this is how Swasth came about. But at the same time, there are also sort of, broader changes happening in the healthcare ecosystem. The health system has been hit very hard. We have lost many colleagues, hospitals, nurses, doctors. We also have a lot of behavior change that happened during the pandemic. Physical clinics were shut down. People were scared to go to hospitals. So we also felt that this is an interesting time to really figure out how can digital health really take the next step. And this gels well with a lot of the work the government has been doing on the National Digital Health Mission, which is really a very grand ambition to create what will essentially be one of the world's largest health information exchanges. And Swasth is now transforming into this private sector group that will continue to build technology for public good, continue to support the public mission, and rope the private sector into essentially a nation-building activity using technology.
That's amazing. When I hear you and Mukesh talk about how Swasth has done so many things in so little time, it's really the passion that you guys have got. You can see the passion written all over. Congratulations. So we'll go to Siraj. Siraj, InnAccel was originally a medtech accelerator to support external startups. How did you reorient into producing life-saving products for maternal care, critical care, etc.? What was the pivot like, and how did you make this change happen?
So you're right, Loni. We did start out as an accelerator. It's in our name. The tagline for InnAccel is Innovation Accelerated. And the goal was to not only support external startups, but also to generate startups through internal ideas. I think the word accelerator and incubator are used very widely to cover ranges of activities. But in the US, where there are dedicated medtech incubators, they typically work on ideas that the core team is generating internally and then setting up R&D teams to build them. So we kind of wanted to do both. We started out setting up internal teams to develop products in critical care and maternal care and ENT. And we structured these as subsidiary companies within InnAccel. Also, when we started, I like to say we drank the biodesign Kool-Aid. Biodesign is this Stanford University's methodology for medtech innovation. And to us, or at least to me, it was like finding religion. And, it is a very, very intensive and logical way to go deep into the clinical environment and identify and deeply understand a problem and then figure out how to solve it. And we found this approach to be very compelling and, allowing us to do a lot more than what we were seeing in the medtech startup ecosystem generally, which were, not to be disparaging, but versions of products and technologies that exist today, whether they are ECG systems, patient monitors. We didn't see a lot of people that were developing completely novel technologies from first principles. And that is what we really saw as need of the hour in India. And so that was one of the reasons that we reoriented our efforts, or rather focused exclusively on generating internal innovations. And that is what led to the pivot of InnAccel into a medtech company. Uh, Operationally, it really wasn't that different. We were structured as one company with subsidiaries. We integrated everything into one entity. The R&D teams continued to work on the products. The places where the pivot really changed things were that we built an integrated commercialization organization, and this is across the portfolio of products that we've launched. And also the going forward, functions like corporate management, capital raising, all of that would be integrated. So that is really what the pivot has achieved for us. I actually think that this has been a good move by us. And I think one of the key reasons is that medical technology, any product technology, has a singular product risk. And when you have a portfolio of products, that risk kind of gets mitigated. And that is what we really saw in this COVID pandemic. I mean, we, with incredibly bad timing, launched our portfolio of novel devices late last year in India, and all of our sales activity stopped in February with the COVID problem. The fact that we had different teams, we were able to build a COVID product and launch it by July. And that is really what InnAccel is working on and selling today. That allows us to, play one product where the need is high while retaining the other assets. So that is the pivot that we went through. And we are now a regular old medtech company with a bunch of products that we are trying to commercialize.
Okay, fantastic. So we kind of seen how a company like you have pivoted. We heard from Ajay that COVID brought a completely new organization to play, and we have heard from Aastha and Ashok as to how they facilitated.
I wanted to call out my appreciation for Invest India and Aastha and our team. Besides connecting us to hospitals, they were also very helpful in dealing with customs and shipping, and really helped us get our components, critical components for our non-invasive ventilation system into India. So thanks, Aastha.
Thank you so much. So glad to hear this. Yeah.
I go back to Ajay. As a non-profit alliance for digital health that came together during the pandemic, how do you see Swasth helping the healthcare ecosystem?
So, as we think about the next steps for an organization like Swasth, which really came into being with the single purpose of addressing the pandemic with digital tools and technologies, we see a few different roles that we can play. So one is to continue building the technologies that we've built out, popularize them more. And this is a product platform that allows doctors and patients to connect. I think one of the things that we are very excited about is, can this be made available to clinicians at the last mile? So this could be GPs, this could be people in rural India, this could be people in tier 2, tier 3 cities who might not really have access to what MedTech is giving them today. And then use that as a portal to allow them to access other technologies that they can also start getting access to, which are more advanced and that you might find in cities and you might find in the top end. So really trying to digitize the last mile through this nonprofit, because we again think that there is a market failure there. We are not quite sure if there'll be private companies that can go and do that. So as a nonprofit, we might be better placed to do that. So that's one piece. The other is to continue building out some of these standards that we've talked about with the National Digital Health Mission. And there are broadly two kinds of standards. One is semantic standards or information exchange standards. And that's a lot of work that we've been doing right now with insurance companies and others, is how do you really have a simplified electronic claims form? How do you have a simple e-prescription format that different companies and different providers can understand, and that can become the standard of interchange between these different providers and payers? The goal with all of this is that we are hoping that if a lot of these pieces, a lot of these information exchange standards can be agreed upon and widely adopted, then you could actually dramatically bring down the cost of, say, processing a claim or the time it takes to process a claim, and really spur innovation on top of that, where you really need new kinds of financing models, new kinds of insurance in India, which covers the comprehensive health journey of the patient. So that's one kind of standards that we're working on. The other is really quality standards. So, there's a lot of telemedicine that has happened over the last 10, 15 years, you have seen, I mean, there's been a behavior shift amongst clinicians right now, doing a lot more teleconsultations now. And while the government has, during the pandemic, okayed telemedicine as a valid means of providing care, we believe that there is reason and room for quality standards for people who can start offering telemedicine. And as an alliance of different healthcare companies, we've been able to sort of bring them together and have a conversation around what kind of standards can they aspire to. And so that's another piece of work that we're doing. And the third is really building out public digital infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier. And there, for example, one of the things that we're working on is creating a nationwide drug index, which doesn't exist today, right? So if you want to actually have a place to go to and figure out what drugs are legal in India, what are the drug-drug interactions, there's very little available today. And we are hoping that we can create something that is a public good that can be available through APIs that absolutely anybody can plug into. And we're working with a range of partners to try and do that, to try and actually put this together and also work with the government. Because the government, the way the drug approval system works, it's really done in a federated manner at the state level. So the idea also is to collate all of that, put it in one place, and then make that widely available. So we are hoping that a lot of these are really sort of ecosystem building blocks that we think that others can use and then innovate on top of. And we will continue to provide this as infrastructure. And so those are some of the ways that we think that we can help the entire ecosystem move forward and not just us.
Okay, that's great. You're now coming into like even helping define the policy matters. That is really great, that from where you started to what stage you're going into the next phase. Good to hear that, Ajay. So Siraj, working towards building healthcare devices faster, better, and affordable prices, what role did COVID play in enhancing the business? And how is COVID going to help enhance it further?
As I was saying earlier, InnAccel has developed a portfolio of innovative medical technologies in the critical care, maternal care space. And, we, after development was about 4 to 5 years of R&D, and we launched those products in late 2019 in the market. The first initial impact of COVID on us was negative. It completely stopped all the sales conversations that were going on these products, because understandably, the entire focus shifted to preparing for COVID and procuring products like ventilators, PPEs, and so on. This really was a pretty hard impact for us because our sales cycle was just taking off. However, we regrouped, and during the lockdown, we defined the gap and the need for non-invasive ventilation systems in India, when the entire focus at that time, if you remember in April, was in buying invasive ventilators. And we felt that India does not have the doctors, the infrastructure, the ICU capabilities to deploy such a large number of invasive ventilators, and also the outcomes of patients on these ventilators were pretty bad globally. More than 80% of COVID patients going on a ventilator were dying. So we took a call to develop a non-invasive ventilation system for COVID. And this was a lockdown baby, as we call it. We commercially launched the product in July. And this is a non-invasive ventilation system that can provide 2 kinds of breathing support called CPAP and HFNC. And along with this, we developed a disposable CPAP hood or helmet, which is a closed transparent structure, which allows for safe ventilation of a COVID patient without the infection going out. So these were the products we developed in response to the COVID crisis. And, with generous support from the ACT Foundation, Loni, that you are a part of, or Ashok is a part of. So these technologies were developed in record time, and we launched them in July. And these have really taken off in the market, once again with ACT's support and with support from Invest India and BIRAC and so on. So the COVID gave us an opportunity to contribute to build a product. And we've so far, I think, installed about 200 odd non-invasive ventilation systems in India, treated over 1,000 patients, probably more by now. But it did impact negatively the normal business of healthcare and medical procurement, as it very understandably should. I think from the longer term, COVID will have an impact on our business. I think in the short term, we still have The negative is that we do not know when purchasing and demand for non-COVID products will increase. However, in the long term, we see two big opportunities for InnAccel because of COVID. One is with our product Fetal Light, which is a new technology in monitoring labor and monitoring the health of the fetus during labor. Our technology makes this process remotely possible, and it's easy enough that a mother can do it at home. In today's COVID scenario, mothers are very reluctant to go for pre-labor scans to the hospital, which is the only way the fetal scan can be done today. So we've actually started 3 pilots with organizations on home monitoring of post-36-week pregnancies using Fetal Light. So that, I think, is one big long-term opportunity for us. Our other technology, VAP Care, which automates a manual procedure done by nurses today in the ICU, also has pretty big COVID implications because the manual procedure that nurses do today exposes them to the patient's saliva, which in the COVID scenario is very risky and is a big source of infection. So we have the only technology in the world that automates that entire process in a closed room. So long term, I think if we survive the COVID downturn, things are looking good for InnAccel.
Well, really great to hear all the innovation you're doing, Siraj, at the forefront of, especially when such a difficult times we are going through. And if I'm not mistaken, did you not win an award for the non-invasive ventilator recently?
Yeah, a few. We just received the Economic Times Award by mail today, and on Saturday I heard we won the Tech Impact Award at Bangalore Tech Summit, but that will be given in December.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah, if we joke in InnAccel, we got to get as many sales as we've gotten awards, you know. We can't pay people in awards, unfortunately.
Wow.
But we have been recognized, and it's gratifying, the help that we've received from the government, from organizations like ACT, and the fact that the team during lockdown came into work and just created this life-saving asset. Makes you feel good.
Great. So, Aastha, during this time, liquidity and funding crunches happening, and many investors, I believe, backed out from certain startup projects, while many others invested in different startups. In times like this, what were some of the relief measures for the ecosystem with respect to funding, in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you, Luni. I think while you're right, that it was a tough time. Even investors wanted to wait out to see how, how the decisions will pan out. So while, what we noticed was that investors were no longer looking at profitable business, but rather than, they were instead looking for businesses that were more sustainable, that had a long cash pipeline and could, and were more resilient. So with that regard, one, we saw a shift in the investment trend. So while there were sectors like tourism and hospitality, which were badly affected, but let's say sector like EdTech, within the last 6 months, they have already accounted for more than 98% of the entire funding that they received last year. So we also saw sectors like EdTech, health tech, and the startups making work from home tools. A lot of funding going in these sectors as well, and that's the trend that we saw in the ecosystem. With respect to the funding support by the government, like you mentioned, right? The government of India declared the economic package that was more for MSMEs. However, since the definition of the MSME was also refined, right? This was the first time after too many years that the MSMEs were actually clubbed, and the manufacturing and services had one common definition. Micro was straight away increased from 25 lakh to 1 CR, to small from 5 crores to about 50 crores in terms of investment and turnover. That literally classified all the startups as well, because in India, how we define startups is someone with of revenue less than 100 crores and who is doing something innovative, job creation, or supporting job creation or wealth promotion, and is not more than 10 years. So there is no age criteria in MSME, and as per the revenue criteria, also all startups were now classifying under MSMEs as well. So ideally, what we realized and what we were also encouraging startups were to avail of the support announced for MSME. So there was a 3 lakh crore emergency working capital facility for businesses. So, the line was available up to 20% of the entire outstanding credit, and businesses could take loan up to a 4-year tenor with an additional moratorium of 12 months on the principal repayment. A lot of credit incentives for guarantees were covered by the government of India for these units. Then there was a 20,000 crore subordinate debt that was also announced. And in addition to this, 4,000 crore was also given to the additional credit guarantee trust scheme that was already being provided to MSMEs. What we also saw was that there was a 50,000 crore equity infusion for MSMEs through fund of funds. In addition to that, what we realized was that startups were, while there were equity and loan schemes for MSMEs, we also encouraged SIDBI. So SIDBI came up with a special loan scheme for startups who were specially working on COVID-related products, providing them loan of up to 2 crores. So, and there was it was a completely online process. Applications were being dispersed very quickly. And last, if I'm not wrong, about 14 crore of funds were already dispersed from this SIDBI help as well. What was even more encouraging was to see private players as well come up with a lot of funding for the ecosystem. So Luni, like the ACT fund that you are supporting right now, we were in touch with them as well, providing them a pipeline of startups that could be funded through their pool. Then IIT Bombay team, along with DST, the Department of Science and Technology, came up with a program called Kavach, identifying these critical care innovations by startups, providing them funding, providing them lab support, and taking them further. So I think it was combined that the effort of that ecosystem that helped us sail through during these tough times. And this time we've also worked on 2 dedicated schemes for startups that are in a very advanced stage of discussion. While I'm not at a liberty to talk much about these 2 new funding schemes, but hopefully they should see the light of the day pretty soon. So we are looking forward to these new schemes as well.
Good to hear that you are able to help out the startups, especially on the funding side, which seem to be having a big issue. Ashok, I would like to ask you, how did NASSCOM keep the startups engaged and energized during this period? What were some of the initiatives you took?
Thank you, Loni. I would say that I would like to answer this from all our NASSCOM entities perspective, because each one of us, while we all work, there's a lot of synergy in it, but each one, we have our own initiatives and programs. To start with NASSCOM 10K, basically we have this 10,000 startups in few locations in the country. So obviously everything had to go virtual. So we started a program called Ask Me Anything. Okay. So that is something where we had 1-to-1 to 1:few. And that particular program, has actually taken off in a very big way, especially in the second phase of the lockdown, where the startups actually came about, asked anything to a set of mentors which we got from the industry. So that's one activity which was actually done very effectively during the COVID times. Then the second thing which we started off is a very interesting thing is we enhanced our NIP program. NIP is NASSCOM Industry Partner Program, wherein we connect the startups directly with the enterprises. Because the whole framework we work in the startup ecosystem is through a framework called FAME, that is Funding, Acceleration, Mentoring, and Enterprise Connect. So the whole aspects of, when we talk about Enterprise Connect, it became very, very important. So in a day, we were able to do 2 to 3 pitches. Whereas earlier, we really had some challenges to bring them all into one location, to our incubation center or a warehouse, we call them, and then have these pitches. So it became very easy. Actually, the entire aspects of the virtual world, as you said Zoom, yes, everything is gone, the Zoom or any other technology. And actually it helped in that particular way to have more pitches. So that is the other aspect which really happened. Third is our Center of Excellence actually did a remarkable job by actually taking the health the startups ecosystem and work with Niti Aayog. And Niti Aayog is basically more of an advocacy, wherein they were able to take them and actually, sort of promote this not promote, actually talk about these particular products into, various solutions. And many of them actually have become very successful, the startup, especially in the health domain. So that is the other initiative which really happened. The other important thing is we saw that major resurgent happened in health, edutech, fintech. So these are the 3 major areas, and you have clearly seen that out of the 4 unicorns which happened during COVID, a couple of them are actually in the fintech area, right? So we were actually in a position to help many of the firms, especially in the edutech, to really pivot themselves to basically go more online than what they were doing in the conventional classroom led modules. So that's the other aspects. We help them through various mentors as well as our own knowledge on basically disseminating this particular training module. So these are the other aspects actually which help the startup ecosystem to really cope up with the current challenges and pivot themselves. And actually, I would say right now they are reimagining the entire business as they go forward. So I would say that if you look at data, we said 70% of them seem to be having a very small runway of 3 months, but that data subsequently over the next couple of quarters changed. And I would say barring about 20 to 25% who are currently having some challenges, rest of them have really pivoted. I would say nearly 30 to 40% of them have pivoted, and rest of them who are really doing well, they continue to do well, especially food tech, for example, they're doing extremely well. So those are some of the things which we have kept the entire ecosystem energized, ecosystem helping them in transformation, helping them in connecting, helping them in connecting to the funders as well as enterprise ecosystem, including many other as funders as well as VCs from abroad, Sweden, Germany, Japan, for example. So these were some of the things which we help the larger ecosystem to scale overall the startup, which includes social enterprises as well as the other ones who are in the typical non-NGOs type of sectors also, to really scale up in this environment.
It's amazing the scale at which you are operating, Ashok. How old is NASSCOM Foundation?
We started off in year 2001.
Okay. So when I hear numbers like 10,000 startups and all,
that's a NASSCOM entity. NASSCOM 10,000 is a NASSCOM entity.
Okay.
NASSCOM, because since all of us, it's a social arm of the NASSCOM Foundation. So we have the Center of Excellence, we have the NASSCOM 10K, then we have our own, that is NASSCOM Foundation, which is also into social innovation, which is a 12-year-old entity, NASSCOM Social Innovation Forum, which we run. And one of the mentions, I can't announce it. We are announcing shortly a thing on the health, wherein we are going to work with 10 startups in hospitals in the health domain. Once we are officially able to announce, we'll be announcing it. So I would say that overall, if you look at NASSCOM per se, so we have many entities actually working with the startup ecosystem. And one more entity is very important, is the Data Security Council of India, because they also have their own labs and work with the startup ecosystem. So overall, all the 4 or 5 entities actually we work together. And so the overall impact is high when I look at all the various entities which are coming together and working in their own initiatives, but sometimes we collaborate so that we are able to take the common problems what the industry is facing or what the consumers are facing together to give a meaningful solution.
That's good. Thank you. Changing gear a little bit, Siraj, Ajay, Swasth got a lot of safe healthcare to the safety of our homes, considering that doctor consultation is something people used to be more familiar with face-to-face kind of doctor consultation. What were the key challenges in coping with this? And how did you manage to get the change in the culture?
So, I've been working on telemedicine since about 2008. And I think over the last decade, what we've generally seen is some hesitation on part of patients, some hesitation on part of the providers to actually use this method of communication. COVID really changed all of that, and it changed all of that in not just in India but across the world, where people had no choice but to really start using technology to communicate. I mean, as we are doing right now, we would likely have had the session in person, but we are having it virtually. And most clinics were shut, especially with health centers and hospitals. Also remember that people have been very hesitant to go. People are scared to go to hospitals just because they fear that they'll get infected at the hospital. So I think that there was a lot of behavior change that had already happened. And I think that you've sort of seen that last during the lockdowns, and you've seen that come down a little bit now. I think people are now going back to reopening their clinics, etc. But I think the future I see is an ecosystem where things are seamlessly offline and online. I don't think either or is the correct answer eventually. Eventually, you need to give the patient and the provider the flexibility to provide care in a fairly seamless fashion, offline and online. I think a lot of the work that we're doing on data, etc., will also enable that. But we also have to understand that India has a severe deficit of healthcare workers. And without leveraging technology like this, we will never actually be able to serve all the needs of the nation. So we have to now figure out, what combination of technology versus physical, what combination of, trained healthcare providers versus, say, community health workers, extension workers. But we have to work on reinventing a health system that works for this country, given the resources we have and given the human resources we have more than anything else. So I think digital's become a lot more accepted now. I think I haven't seen this kind of a sea change in provider behavior ever, right? Like, doctors are usually very slow to change behavior, and I think that's happened over this time. So I think that we are in the middle of a change. We will see where this settles, but we are in the middle of a change in terms of how people use technology, especially in medicine.
That's great. It's good to see that this change is happening. And I can say for myself also, I have not stepped out to go to any clinic. In spite, there were 1 or 2 cases, I could just do a tele-consultation. So it's changed quite a bit. I could never imagine that pre-COVID. So, Siraj, during this whole, I know we have heard about a lot of startups getting affected by funding issues, etc. What were the key challenges faced by you on the funding side, and how did you cope with it? And are there any specific organizations that helped you during this process?
So we were actually in talks with investors late last year to raise capital for InnAccel when the whole COVID scenario started becoming prominent, late December, early Jan. And some of the conversations definitely, they stopped or they fell off because of just the uncertainty. I think in the initial phase of the COVID pandemic and lockdown, people were just uncertain as to what's going to happen. People were uncertain about their own health. So I think a lot of just decision-making got pushed back, especially as it related to deploying capital. Again, their ACD support and really helped us navigate that tough time. One of the investors that we were in close discussions with late last year, eventually we managed to close a round with them. And so we raised some capital in October this year. So from that perspective, I think we've been okay. But there were, significant challenges. Like I said, the uncertainty that COVID brought about, which was much more than just a business uncertainty or an economic uncertainty. I think that just froze operations. People didn't know where things were going to go, and therefore that wasn't a good time to take any decisions. Also, the entire lockdown made in-person meetings impossible, and until 2-3 months ago, I think it was almost de rigueur for investors to, as they say, press the flesh, meet the people, spend time with them before you write a check. So I think those kind of challenges came about, and I think investors were also trying to figure out that in the post-COVID world, which sectors would be the ones that would want to deploy capital in. So these were the challenges we faced. I think the fact that we were very quick to respond to the COVID crisis, create a product that actually met a need, and do it in a space of 3 or 4 months, and actually start selling it. I think that gave confidence to the investor that we were talking to, and made it possible for them to come in. I think going forward, the investment environment is going to be a little bit uncertain as people figure out 2 things. One is the economy, or what level is the economy going to come back to? What is going to be the new normal for India? There is already talks of our potential growth rate having slipped by about 2.5%. And the other is within that entire shrinking pie, which sectors will do well and which won't. And I think healthcare is sort of on the fence there. Certain healthcare companies will do very well, and I think there'll be certain businesses that will be impacted negatively.
Yeah, I saw kind of two types of investors during this period. One was saying, hey, look, I'll kind of hold off any few new investments or discussions which are going on. But we also saw another set of opportunistic investors who said, look, this is the time to go in and let's kind of get some good deals out on the table, So we saw both type of investors during this time.
We did too. I just think we didn't see the good deal as the right thing to do for us.
Good deal for them.
Distress for us.
Yeah. So next, I would actually take it to Aastha, and maybe Ashok can also chip in. According to you, how has the startup ecosystem evolved during this COVID, and what do you think is kind of the future? Especially, are you seeing any kind of shift in strategies going from B2C enterprises to B2B kind of this? Any kind of fundamental shifts happening, and also some crystal ball gazing to the future would help.
Thank you. I'll just start it, then maybe I'll give it to you, Mr. Ashok, to take forward on this question.
Yeah.
I think prima facie, what we saw was that, the pandemic brought the ecosystem together like never before, from cab aggregators working with delivery partners to hotel aggregators working with the hospitals. Everyone just came forward to work together and to support in this ecosystem. So even though people weren't ordering food, but the delivery partners were being used, the entire chain was being put to use for the delivery of essentials. The Oyo hotel rooms had tied up with hospitals to create isolation centers and the like. So the entire ecosystem came together. What we saw was that there was, like Mr. Ashok was also mentioning, that there were a bunch of startups, like he said. I think that's the estimate. We also have around 30% were actually trying to pivot to new businesses and to support the COVID. So, we had a women entrepreneur in our network who had a machine to make sanitary pads. But she said, maybe I can use the same machine to make new mask and PPE kits. So we came up with a lot of startups, pivoting their business model to survive, to meet the current requirements. We also saw that more than 55% of the startups were now focusing on sustainability and, were trying to reduce their cash flow and were trying to negotiate a lot on sustaining, on negotiating with their vendors on, dealing payments and all. What we also saw was that while there was a negative sentiment between March to June, but in June, it also recorded the highest number of incorporation, which is also 50% higher than last year. So which means that the investment sentiment did pick up after June, post the lockdown, when things started to look upwards. Even the stock market, I don't know how it was always up, and the sentiment was positive among the market as well. But in terms of sectors, like, without a thought, Siraj and Ajay have been doing great with the health tech segment. EdTech picked up, fintech picked up. I think the best way to even include financial inclusion, and we were seeing how our local vendors were also going digital with accepting payments, over delivering grocery items. So we saw a lot of financial inclusion also happening during this time. We saw about 7 new unicorns that came up in the last few months. So we felt, we had an estimate of about 8 unicorns being added in 2020, and I'm hopeful that by the close of this year or early next quarter, we should be able to be close to be achieving that number as well. Fundamentally, what we also saw was that automation models, diagnostic models, and businesses leveraging a lot of data and anti-fragile models were the ones that were most sought after by a lot of key players. And I'm not just talking about investors, but we were also approached by a lot of corporates like Novartis, like RB Group, like Max Healthcare, who were looking at these models that were leveraging high-end data to predict things like this, to come up with newer toolkits and analytics that could support their business. So a lot of corporates also came forward during this time to work with startups and adapt to their business models. In terms of B2B and B2C, at a DPIT level, we don't capture this data. But what we have seen is that there was an uptick again from June onwards. There was a dip in the number of startups who were coming forward to recognize, but on an average, we are back to recognizing about 1,000 in a quarter. So that model has also uptake. Probably Mr. Ashok could cover on the B2B and B2C element.
Yeah, thanks, Aastha. I would say that, yes, we are clearly seeing that a surge of B2B. B2B startups are actually doing extremely well than what they were doing earlier. She's right, we had 7 unicorns coming in. and 4 during the pandemic. So that is the very good hallmark what we have. But having said that, innovation actually has to be cross boundaries, right? And typically what happens is the startups are known for innovation, and there is a combination of 3 major pillars which can actually take to scale. One is, innovate from the startup, the industry for scaling, and government as the sponsors. Actually, this pandemic, if you look at when all the people were talking about, everybody had something or the other talking about praise for government in this activity. And we always firmly believe that when you have this 3 combination of startup, industry, and government as a sponsor, innovation from startup and industry for scale, then you will clearly find innovation and using technology at scale for impact at scale. And that's what is currently happening. And that's one of the reasons why you clearly see that the B2B business has actually really taking off in a fairly good manner. While pivoting is the order of the day, because many of the about 30% is what we believe have the startups have pivoted. We also saw in our NASSCOM, startup hub, 8% increase in overall registration. We have currently 4,444 registration in the startup hub. What it essentially means that it is now a resurgent community, right? The overall startup are really looking at going back into normalcy as soon as possible. Our data also shows that 75% of them have almost come back to normalcy, and about 30% of course are pivoting. About 25-30% of them are pivoting. So that is one trend which we are clearly seeing. The other aspect which is very, very important is today we are seeing, because today we are really in an environment which I call it as a flat. The world is really flat. So earlier when we were talking about co-creation, the entire challenge was really happening that the startups had to go to an enterprise and talk to the CIOs or the CTOs and talk about co-creation. Now the whole aspect is because it's such a flat area, they're able to do 2 to 3 pitches I mentioned. So the co-creation is happening in a fairly big way in the country. And again, because it is cross-borderless, today our startups are actually working with German accelerator and German enterprises, Swedish enterprises, Botswana, for example, in Africa, as well as in Korea. So the whole aspect is today our startups today are just not looking at in India. Anyway, we always said desi product, okay, but a Padesi outlook. That is that's the norm, right? So the whole aspect has changed, and today our entire ecosystem is very buoyant. They are extremely happy with the way it is going on, and thanks to great work done by government in setting up a lot of center of excellences across the country, both the one which is supported by NASSCOM as well as by DST, as well as various educational institutions in the country. All of them are suddenly started, the buoyancy is there. And we are clearly seeing that cross-border knowledge sharing is really happening. As I speak today, we have 2 startups one from Germany and the other one from Sweden working in our startup ecosystem. And that's the kind of work which is really happening. So overall, buoyancy is there in B2B, while B2C, there are some challenges, but certain areas which I already mentioned, like food tech, for example, is really taking off. And that's really a B2C. So the other areas I'm sure, it will improve as we go forward. And as the economy opens out further, you'll see that B2C also coming back to normalcy in the near future. Okay. So that is what I would like to share with you on this. So thanks, Loni. It's, I think, an excellent question, how the entire community is actually, I would say, as a resurgent startup ecosystem.
Wow, that's nice. And it's great to hear between you and Aastha talk about, how the collaboration environment has come in, co-creation, cross-border knowledge sharing. I mean, I think this COVID has brought a lot of enemies as friends, I guess. And I think it's a great thing to see that's happening. It's clearly that is one of the best things that has come out of this environment. So I think we'll come to the last few questions. It's like an open session. What are the emergence of different skill sets that we are seeing during COVID and post-COVID that would provide new job opportunities? And, is this addressed to everybody? Maybe Dr. Ajay, you want to start off with your perspective, and then maybe anybody else wants to chip in.
I think that, and this is broadly even beyond health. We've just started a new organization. The entire team is remote. We've actually never met each other. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think what is also happening is that people in tier 2, tier 3 cities, can start working with companies without migrating or moving into the cities. I think there's a lot of that is starting to happen. We've seen that even in our startup ecosystem, where people are being hired, product managers, folks in other functions are being hired across the country. So I think there is this skill of working remotely that is leading to a lot of opening up as far as jobs can be created. And I think that is one interesting piece. In medicine, I think there is a lot that will happen, just given the fact that, given the growth of this digital ecosystem. We are seeing, for example, there are clinicians in Bombay who have gone entirely virtual, for example. And there are new kinds of therapists, new kinds of healthcare providers who are also able to now start offering their services. So I think there's a shift happening where this virtual work is either helping people shift how they work today, or even creating new opportunities for people who would not have normally been part of the job ecosystem. But I'll sort of stop there and see if others have to add anything.
Do we see something like the BPO environment going into more virtual? I mean, what you just mentioned, even opening up opportunities for us in a global scale, global perspective. Like, do you see people outsourcing, let me call it that way, some of these activities? Like, if it's already virtual here, why can't we do for, the same activities for a US company? Do you see that evolving, that kind of skill sets going beyond India?
Right. And I think that's been there for a while, right? So there's Indian talent has been working on sort of global problems for a while. What was interesting to me is that, tier 1 India was not working with tier 3 India. I think that is quite interesting to me. So the global stuff has been happening, and that's happened over the last 2 decades. But the sort of what we're seeing within India, frankly, is a little more exciting because it's new to me, right? Like, I don't think that has happened before.
Okay. Ashok, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that, again, thanks to certain policies which the government has taken, especially the OSP policy, that is the, other service providers, being opened out, we clearly see that work from home will be the new norm. And we clearly see that if you look at our data, we in the IT industry, we employ about 4.3 million people, and bulk of them are from the tier 1 and tier 2 cities. With the current pandemic, we are seeing that many of them have gone back to their small towns and villages. And this will be the order of the day, that you'll find that the overall, the employers will shift from tier 1 cities to tier 2, tier 3, because the fact is that our entire college graduates, we produce about 8 million graduates, right? They're just not coming in from tier 1, they're coming from tier 2, tier 3, and so on. So the placement will happen there, and they'll work there. So the whole paradigm shift is going to happen as to how we are going to work and the kind of recruitment we are going to do. So what it requires is a different skill sets. And I think this is going to be the biggest order of the day, not only for the tech industry as well as for the larger ecosystem, which including the startups itself. And I clearly see that 3 major ones will be 80%, which will be big data analytics, AI, and we all talk about AI for good, and the cloud computing. That will be the order of the day, that this will contribute to maybe 80% of the overall skill sets, apart from various other things like cybersecurity, very important, RPA, mobility, and web designing. You will have UI UX experts required for creating various apps for the startup ecosystem and various other aspects. But technology and technical skills are important. Equally important is professional skills, especially when we are going into the rural areas. So I clearly see and envisage that this particular thing, the larger ecosystem of the social entrepreneurs, are going to really gain and boom in the edutech area, especially when they look at this type of future technologies, as well as the professional skills, which includes probably design thinking, critical thinking, project management, right? Those are some of these negotiation skills, right? These are some of these important skill sets which we require overall to communicate in again, I would like to use the word, a borderless world, a completely virtual world. And I think there's a huge opportunity because we are one of the countries producing largest number of talent today, and talent is our core competency as far as the tech industry is concerned. So I would say that it's no more, we can say that is 8 cities or 10 cities which are contributing to 80% of the GDP for us as far as the tech industry is concerned. Over the next couple of years, you'll clearly see that the economy is also going to shift to tier 2, tier 3s and beyond. And so overall, you'll find that the other small towns and cities are going to flourish. And that will be also the time when startups will also start booming in those small towns and cities. Otherwise, currently, it's largely confined to the bigger cities or tier 1 or maximum tier 2. We don't have tier 3 cities. And that is not the right approach, right? We have to ensure that we produce graduates which are excellent in tier 3, tier 4 cities. Unfortunately, opportunities was not there earlier. Now, thanks to the government's new policy, you'll clearly see that the economy is going to shift. More jobs are going to be created in the rural areas, what we really look forward, especially from the social sector. So we look forward to a brighter and bigger future for the social sector. Thank you, Loni.
That's nice. Good to hear that, because I was talking to a friend of mine who's with Bosch. They have a skill development program called Bridge, and they are now gearing up post-COVID. What are the kind of areas of skill development they should focus on? And I think a lot of these emerging opportunities are things we will now see a lot of investment going in for skill development. Okay, with this, we'll kind of come to the last question, which is more of regarding this whole program done by Goodera, which is Startups for Good and reimagining your businesses for COVID. Obviously was the topic here, but there is also a bigger session going on, so would like to hear from all of you as to what you're looking to learn from these different sessions and leaders during this summit. If you could just give a short answer to that, would love to hear from you.
Sure, I was about to say I'd go first. No, I think congratulations to the organizers and the entire Goodera team. I think in a very precise and bold manner, they've got together some great thought-provoking topics. They've brought together a great lineup of speakers, and I think the entire idea is how different stakeholders are working together and independently to leverage synergies as well as bridging the gap that exists in the ecosystem. So the entire program around virtual volunteering, about bringing the good, use of CSR for good. I think these are some really interesting topics that I personally also am looking forward to. And once again, my compliments to the entire team for putting these sessions together and for bringing us all together. So thank you for that.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me here. And I think that we often in the startup/innovation ecosystem, we often talk about how the world is changing, and I think this is one instance where the world is really changing, and there hasn't been flux like this that we haven't. I haven't seen flux like this in my lifetime, and I'm assuming most people haven't either. So one of the things that I'm really looking to hear from all of the leaders on this panel and others is to see how different industries are coping with this. And I think that there is we also have to remember this is not over yet, right? We are still sort of bang in the middle of the pandemic. There's been a few good vaccines. We'll now figure out how long it takes for all of that to be distributed. We will continue to need a lot more innovation. There is still a lot of change yet to come. So I'm very excited to hear, how others are tackling this and some of the solutions that they're working on. And I've gotten a good glimpse today here on this panel. So quite excited.
Yeah, sure. I think reiterate what I just heard. I think this is a phenomenal program that's been put together by Goodera team. Hats off to you all. Like Ajay, I'm really interested in learning, about other organizations and what they are doing, both in response to the crisis and how they have structured their businesses, and looking for opportunities to collaborate with organizations, that are doing things congruent to us, whether it's in the provision of health services, where we could, partner with our technology or any other way. I think one point that was made earlier about the way the ecosystem has come together in the light of COVID, it has not been seen before. And I think that energy and that collaborative spirit needs to continue and even go further. And that's really what I'm looking to get out of this conference.
Ashok, would love to have your last thoughts.
The thought of karma itself is great. And we pride ourselves in saying that we are a conglomeration of competitors. And this particular, when I look at the lineup of speakers and the kind of the agenda it has been planned, I think it's very exciting to listen to leaders, and look forward to collaborating with them, because that's the only way for us to ensure that we are able to impact at scale. Collaboration is the only way forward to impact a 1.3 billion people. So I really look forward to collaborating with most of them as we go forward. Thank you. And Luni, I want to like to point out that you were a great moderator and very much fun.
Thank you. Thank you. I must say, I have to just also mention about one thing, because when I became an entrepreneur, actually, that was the year 2008 when Sequoia invested into Prism Payments. And we start the company, and there you go. You had the financial crisis come and hit us. And I'm a product of our entrepreneurship journey itself was a product of how to come out of a crisis and see it as an opportunity. I just give one example as a winding up thought. We found that banks with whom we were to deal with suddenly went cold, and they didn't want to invest any money into, because we were offering ATM and POS, etc. services, and they didn't want to invest. And we came out with this model where we said, we will make all the investments and offer to you on a per transaction basis. And that became a huge success. So just wanted to wind up by saying that there is always opportunities in a crisis like this. And I'm happy to be part of this great group today. And this is fantastic hearing all of you on various aspects, both not only on the startup ecosystem, somebody who's running his own company, somebody who's done it like Swasth in a short time frame, and the people who are facilitating like Aastha and Ashok. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.